Hi, and good afternoon. This is Sam Hayes, and this is Why with One Stop. It's my weekly Wednesday kind of recap of different things. Today, we are going to talk about 2025 new laws, what to know that will impact your next real estate deal. I have been doing this for over 20 years. I am all about compliance and file documentation. However, I'm going to let you know that please verify everything I share with you with the broker of record of the file that you are working on. I'm happy to discuss this anytime. You can reach me at 619-993-7264, and I'm here to do videos and provide information to help make all of our lives easier in the industry. So I'm going to go through some of the basics today. A lot of these we've already kind of started to see come up in disclosures and different things. There are definitely way more tenancy laws and other things that have come up. So that I am not an expert in property management. However, I am happy to delve into those. If you want a separate video, leave me a comment, put it in the Q&A or the chat, or also comment on my YouTube page. Again, calls, emails, messengers, whatever I can do to help, you know how to get a hold of me. Let's get into this. So one of the first ones is the AB 2992. If you've watched any of my other videos discussing the buyer broker agreement for the past 6 months, we knew this was coming. AB 2992 made the buyer representation agreement any form. It does not have to be the BRBC that we know as a CAR member, but it needs to be a written agreement that is in place prior to going under a fully executed contract. There's some differences between the NAR settlement compliance, because that's on a national level, and what we're doing on the AB 2992 here for the state of California. Here in the state, this applies to everything. So if you are in the commercial industry, if you have done vacant land, manufactured housing, anything along those lines, it does incorporate that. You will need a written agreement prior to, or as quickly as possible, the executed agreement. It does not apply to leases and rental agreements. However, we'll get into that the NAR settlement does. So you got to be careful about that. Doesn't include a sale of state or federal lands, and it doesn't include anything to do with loan brokering services. That timing is as soon as is practical. Well, what is that? Let's, as soon as you can quickly get this signed up. If there's a deal, somebody's traveling, be careful. We all have DocuSign and e-signing services at this time. You really want to try and get in the habit, mentally be thinking you need to do this prior to sending a contract, sending over an offer, reviewing anything along those lines. It's just your best practice to do it. The sooner you can show documentation, timing frame, all of that, better off you are if you do end up getting an audit. They are 3 months, not 90 days, 3 months. That is a big deal. It's only, those are for individuals. If it's an entity, that's a different situation because that's considered an educated buyer who has legal representation. So you have different time frames with that. But the 3 month thing is a big deal because if you have this document, your buyer representation agreement, in any way, shape, or form that is not compliant, that can void it, meaning you don't get paid. So take a couple seconds and just do the 3 months, not the 90 days like we've done before, but 3 months. It's got to include compensation to the real estate broker. How much are they getting paid? The buyer needs to be aware of what they are responsible for. What services will be rendered? What am I paying for? What am I getting? When do I have to pay you? The BRBC states that you'll be paid through close of escrow. That may be different if you have a different type of agreement or have had something drawn up by your legal team. So make sure that's incorporated. How do we terminate? How do we cancel this? How do we walk away? What do we do? Agency disclosure. You have got to explain we're working together. Here's the agency, all that information. Again, that should be to comply with agency civil codes and laws, the first document you provide. We're dealing with many levels here. So we've got the NAR settlement over here, which is not it's a legal agreement for those of us that are NAR members. However, this AB is a California law, so also civil code. So where do we put this all together? How do we make that work? Best practice, and always verify with the broker of record you're working with, what's the most stringent? What's the most conservative? What is the top tier? One of the practices I've always done on my files is when I've learned something from one brokerage that's even more restrictive or more of a requirement, apply it across the board. It's never going to hurt you to do a little bit more. It's never going to hurt you to be in over compliance. over communication, over documentation. It's part of why we're in all of this stuff. Never gonna hurt, always best practice. So talk to your broker of record how you guys want to move forward. This does not supersede, like we were just talking about, because we got different pieces. One's California law, one's over here in a national legal settlement. We trying to fit everything in all these puzzle pieces together. These violations, because again, California law, fall under the Department of Real Estate. That means that is a violation that they can prosecute, they can come after. That includes your license. Be aware, make sure you're double checking and reading everything. Copies of the recording will be available on my YouTube channel afterwards. So you can always go to @OneStopTC on YouTube, and that's where all of my recordings go up. And I also put a link all over Facebook and everything else. Feel free to email me or message me if you'd like one. Okay, so then, oops, skip too many pages, got that. My slides went out of order. It's been that kind of a day. Again, that we just talked about the difference between the NAR settlement and the AB 2992. We're dealing with a nationwide agreement that's a legal settlement versus a California state law. Well, when's the timing? Well, NAR, you got to do it prior to doing any activity of showing a home, acting as an agent. That includes on videoing on your phone. It doesn't mean they have to physically be present. California's like as soon as practical. Always best practice before you do anything, just make it your first one, is what I would do. Double check. Compliance is based on, again, the NAR membership versus the DRE enforcement. Which one is which? NAR is focusing on residential. It's focusing on sales and leases and having these written agreements, where the state is like, nope, everybody's doing this. If you were doing a real estate transaction, then you're going to go ahead and do it. There's really no length of restriction of how long you can have that agreement for NAR. However, CAR, California Association of Realtors, knew this law was in process. They actually were one of the sponsors of it originally when it first came out. So that's why the verbiage in our BRBC and why that's set up to be 3 months is to mirror it. Okay. So backtracking, because of course my slides had to be creative on me. So this one is about ADUs. We're talking about the amenity extension. So if you had a junior ADU or an ADU built prior to January 1st, 2020, this is going to extend the ability to get permits for it, to make it so that you don't have to pay the extra fee. It's to make sure that it's little basic things to bring it up to code. Now, if you have a health and safety issue, roofs falling in, we've got an open leak, there's sewer issues, anything that's dangerous, electrical, that could be they come in and say, nope, there's no way, this is a fire hazard, especially with what's going on in our universe right now. This is not going to apply. You've got to fix that. This is not going to get you through that and be a band-aid. You've got to make sure that you are going for the little basic things to bring you up to code. This is trying to be something of giving grace, getting the cities and the counties to be a little bit more transparent about how to access this, how to be able to obtain the information. You don't have to require to pay impact fees, connections, or capacity charges if it's not related to those health and safety issues. And they also need to make sure that cities and counties that you can go online and you've got a checklist so that homeowners know what they're doing. What do I have to do to come into this compliance to get this permit? They need to have accessibility on there to go through. They also need to be aware that they could have an inspector come through, help them get this fixed before they go for that permit. Have somebody come tell them what they need to get done, then you go do it. So it's little things like that, but they're trying to basically smooth out and have less red tape, less problems, and people in the county trying to get everything up to code, making it easier for transactions, sales, and all those things. As we know, we are still short inventory. So there's been an encouragement of the ability to put in or utilize ADUs and JADUs. Balcony inspections. Okay, this one is making everybody a little bit crazy. We've got two different laws that came into play here. So AB 2579 said, look, we get it. This is a little overwhelming. So if you are a one or three or more multi-unit dwelling that is not a condo conversion, then that where it's all the one thing, your rentals, you've got till 2026. And then after that, you're going to have to do this inspection every 6 years. It's for condos though, they're like, no, you guys should know. So all the HOAs should have had these done by now and should be in the records. Well, how do we make sure about that? That's one of the things we're going to walk into in the next little bit here, talking about where it is in the disclosures and in the contract. Also, what documents we need to be adding to our contract and disclosures to make sure it's all covered. What is an elevated element? What is that? So it's anything that's 6 feet off the ground that incorporates any type of wood. So if you have just like decorative wood sticking out, you've got balconies, you've got anything that's supported along those lines, it's a concern for fires, safety. It's also a concern of structural support. They're now mandating that this needs to be done. If you're in one of the condos, they should have already had them done. If they have not had them done, needs to be done at ASAP, and then there will be a repeat of every 9 years when it's done. It is in the health and safety code now. So this is where we get into the issues where I think you're going to see, and probably have already seen, some of the increases in reserve requirements, HOA assessments to come into compliance for all these new rules and regs. Well, who gets to do that? Who certifies this, Sam? What's going on? So there's a list of that we'll go into, but they added civil engineers to help expedite this. That's what AB 214 did. It's a lot more basic than it's being made out to. I think it's being made a much scarier thing than it is. So we'll see how this evolves. There's going to be more information and more clarification coming over this year expected from CAR and the DRE. Where do we find this, Sam? What do I do? So it's already been in the purchase agreement, but it didn't have to be enforced, but they did incorporate it. So right now you can find it in the RPA in section 11N, stating that if you know about this, if you know we've got 3 or more dwelling units, elevated balconies, stairways, other elements, seller is to provide buyer with the wooden balcony stairs addendum, the WBSA, and comply with its terms, which we will review next. If you are a buyer's agent and you have looked at the property, throw one in. It's not going to hurt to get it done. Make sure it's documented. Different lenders are having issues with this. It's similar to how when we started doing with some of the home hardening and different lenders trying to be ahead and documenting things. I'm seeing interesting requests, and make sure I've had heard of a couple of deals that have fallen out because of this. Find out what your lender is going to be needing. You're going to have the seller request a lot of things from the HOA if they're not included in the HOA documents. Something to take a look at, be aware of. We're going to be seeing more of this evolve, just as we did with the FHDS and how that was such a big deal. And now we're all knowing how to work with it. This is going to be a similar situation. It's also in, I'm sorry, that should be SPQ K. That's where you go ahead and answer from the seller's point of view, whether or not that they have 3 or more units property prepared within the last 6 years or 9 years for the condos. If they click that, then you're going to need to have the addendum. I'm working on a file right now where we're kind of working our way through and learning this. So one of the benefits of doing your disclosures and your listing paperwork early is getting this information, talking to your client, asking them, hey, have you seen an assessment come across any time recently? Have you gotten any info from your HOA saying they're doing these repairs? Anything in the newsletters that you know of? All of that is always great to go ahead and add as supporting documentation, putting it to the third party, who is the contact of the third party. Again, verify with the broker of record of the file you are working on how they want to handle that. This is the fabulous new form. So this is our WBSA. And here's where it breaks it down. So this is an addendum. You want to remember, this is an addendum to the contract. One of the things I want to point out, though, is it does not apply to the owner of the property. So it's to the HOA, not the seller. The seller is not required to provide this document. However, they are to be able to help facilitate accessibility to the document if the HOA says they won't talk to the buyer because they're not an HOA member yet. The lender needs this, that, and the other. Get your client ready. Make sure they've got contact info. They know who to talk to if we have to get stuff. We also all know HOAs can take a little bit of time. It may not be digitized. Make sure we're asking about this early, finding out and being prepared so that you have the answers and help expedite your contract. This also clarifies the requirement to deliver the report to the buyer. So if you are required to do this, but we're exempt from it, what do we do? So the requirement to deliver the report to the buyer is more on your 3 plus units. So we're talking, you've got a 5-unit apartment complex that's got the upstairs stairs and we've got balconies, something along those lines. That's when it's going to be the individual seller, since they're the one who's going to be the point of contact, no HOA involved. We've got 18 units, we're going through an HOA, it's condo sale, then that's going to be over to the HOA who's required. That's in section 3, clarifying that. It also goes through and saying that this is what's going to go on, the reports are what they're supposed to include, and who's authorized to do this. Because part of it was like, okay, great, but who's going to be the one? Because you want to make sure you have a valid report. So this goes through and clarifies that we can use licensed structural engineers, architects, civil engineers along those lines, as we just discussed how AB 2114 incorporated and added more inspectors that are available and allowed to provide the report. Again, talk to your broker of record, find out what they want to do. It's definitely worth having the conversation with your client. Be observant when you're showing property or when you are listing property. Hey, could be a red flag down the line. Let's get this going now during the listing so we can have everything ready and you can have a smoother transaction and not have delays. So then we're going into the handyman work. So they've expanded this. Before it was only 500. Now we're at 1,000. It's got to be all of the work, all of the materials, everything's got to be under 1,000. It cannot require permits. Also, it does not apply if somebody's trying to like piecemeal it out and say it's a sub. No, we're under a giant contract. We're doing a home reno. No, that doesn't count. This is for smaller, independent, individual projects. You can't do a bunch of, well, I have all these contracts and they're all at $9.99. No, doesn't work. You're trying to get around stuff. They already called it out. If you're employing somebody to assist you, that's not handyman work. That's you and your own business. That's as a contractor. That doesn't count either. Something to remember about this is if you have somebody who's just purchased the property within the past 18 months, that this is going to fall into the flipper law. And this is still going to be something, including invoices or receipts, that will need to be disclosed. Here's where I'm talking about that flipper disclosure. So this is where that's going to tie into needing to track this stuff down. Even if you're doing, we got the place painted, Sam. Great. We got this done. Great. Let's get all the documents. Let's get that vendor info over. Even if it's an email that we can PDF, something that we can put it on the third party to present to the buyer. Well, Sam, they've owned the house for years and years and years. Okay. But did they do any work in the past 18 months? Have they been doing some stuff? Well, yeah. Why not go ahead and still do this? Why not go ahead and still be in this, provide this information? It's not going to harm anybody. It's definitely the material facts regarding the property, and you're ahead of the curve on it. There are different people that have interpreted this that any work done in the past 18 months. Well, no, technically it's only if you bought it within the past 18 months, but it's really not a bad practice. It's not going to be a bad thing. And again, property sold as is. So we're just disclosing material known fact from the seller, but verify all with the broker of record that you're working on. So what do we do if we've got a foreclosure sale? I know this has been a long time since we've had any of these, especially with what happened during the as I call it, the pandemic and everything else, and delays and the stops. Well, the world is changing. We don't know what's coming up. So it's always good to be ready and understand what could be required if, unfortunately, a client is in this type of situation. So if you have a client who has a pending foreclosure sale, you can get that stopped. You have to do it. You get a 45-day postponement. Deliver to the trustee. So whoever is saying we're coming in and doing a foreclosure sale, 5 business days. Now, typically it's calendar days for everything but the deposit and the RPA. So that tends to get stuck in our minds. Business days prior to the sale date. And you want proof of delivery. You want a receipt. You want something to show that you've actually sent it over. And you've got to have an executed listing agreement. It's got to be with a broker. It cannot be like my uncle, cousin's brother, sister just wrote this up and he's going to list the house. No, it has to be publicly marketed. You can only do it one time. This isn't one where we can keep relisting it and trying to buy more time. You get another 45 days though. So we've got 45 days because we got in the listing. And then all of a sudden, then clock's ticking, but we got an offer and we got accepted. Awesome. That's another 45 days to let you complete that transaction. Again, we're doing the same thing. I got 5 business days prior to that sale date. We've got to deliver with proof proof of delivery. Take into account holidays. We just got through having all of the typical winter holidays, but we've still got President's Day coming up. You've got Cesar Chavez Day, which gets a little gray, but that's here in San Diego. Different recording dates. You can get in a fight. What's a business date? We've got Juneteenth. There are many, many dates coming in that people don't take into account, and you need to add that to your math for when you're getting 5 business days prior and back out your calendar. The price is going to be equal or greater to the amount of the unpaid balance of all obligations. You got to make them whole. We've got to say, look, you're going to be made whole. Give us some time. We're going to fix this. And you only get to do it once. So you get one shot. I feel like Eminem. Get one shot. Anywho, so you're going to want to take a look at all of that. There are a couple of other new laws that are coming out or that are out right now that are getting some clarity and everything else. That's my basic info. You can always call me. I would talk about the stuff till I'm blue in the face. So there's one about wells and such. It's not as big a deal for us typically here in San Diego. I'm happy to go into that if you have questions. Another one that is coming up is about the disclosing if the seller knows, which is where we get into the weird gray area regarding electrical versus gas, the whole state thing. We expect more disclosures on that to be out in December 2025. So I will be back and updating as I learn more about that. I hope you join me next Wednesday. I believe the topic is going to be the recap of what went wrong this month. I go through everything that went wrong at the end of the month, any problems I've had on files, how to avoid it, what we could do better, what to be aware of, what's the tripping up factors, all of that stuff, the forms that fixed it, and how we fixed it. So I'll be doing that next Wednesday. What topic would you like to hear about? I'd love to hear it in the comments or contact me. Either I'm on all the social media platforms at One Stop TC. And thank you so much. As always, verify with broker of record. I'm Sam Hayes. This is Why with One Stop. Call anytime. 619-993-7264. Thanks for being here.